Welcome back to the establishment, heard every Saturday morning, 9 to 11 a.m. here on AM 700 KBYR. Alaska Talks here. You know, the biggest names in talk radio are on this station. Mark Levin, Sam Sorbo, Dave Ramsey, Michael Savage.
Sam Moore.
I'm best for last, dude.
Okay.
And
right.
wow, wow.
Well,
now that you've stomped all over that great...
Michael Dukes is also here.
That great run-up to you, I was going to say, and Sam Moore, best for last.
And Brendan Berger.
Yeah, thank you. On the phone with us, Jonathan Taylor, the founder of the website of voiceformalestudents.com. Jonathan, thanks so much for giving us some time this morning. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Great,
you sound really good. Yeah.
So, Jonathan, you're the founder of a website called the voiceformalestudents.com, which we will link up on our Facebook page. For anyone who's not familiar, and I wasn't until I stumbled across it referenced in a New York Times article. Tell us what it is.
Well, it's basically a website advocating a broad range of educational issues for men and boys. So, you know, on the one hand, we may talk about things like graduation rates or what we perceive to be the rampant misdiagnosal, things like ADHD, dropout rates, but we also talk about like the bias that some of the teachers, some of the administrators, some students have against male students. Also about discipline practices that are unfavorable toward male students, and I believe we'll be talking about some of that today, such as, you know, there's unfortunately a trend in higher education especially, where male students are, if they are wrongly accused of sexual assault, they have very little, well, universities are now required by the Department of Education to have their own in-house adjudication process, and a lot of them don't really have any kind of you know, consciousness of due process and no real guidelines set up for that. So that's very much in the media, or increasingly in the media today, as people are increasingly finding out about these things.
So the Department of Education, there's a federal oversight of this specific issue?
There most certainly is. In 2011, the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, headed then by Ruslan Ali, now by Catherine Lamon, they issued a 19-page document. They framed it as a guidance letter, but it was really more like an edict. It's called the Dear Colleague Letter, and every now and then they send out letters, guidance letters, to clarify how people should interpret federal guidelines like Title IX on a wide range of issues. But in this one, it was guiding administrators on how to adjudicate and to tell them that they should, independent of police and the courts, have their own in-house adjudication for sexual assault. And so it listed a bunch of things that they should do for the accuser, very few things that they should do for the accused. And it also basically commanded them to adjudicate it based upon an extremely low standard of evidence, in particular the preponderance of evidence standard. And so now we have a bunch of colleges and universities that are scrambling to comply with this document, a lot of which is actually kind of vague in telling administrators what they should do. So a lot of administrators tend to overcompensate for that to avoid a Department of Education investigation, and from that we have a lot of violations of due process for our young men. That's where we are today.
This reminds me a lot of a friend of mine, Christina Hoff Summers, wrote a book, The War Against Boys, and that totally encapsulates how this is a systemic and you know, system-wide. I don't want to say emaciation, but that's what it is of men today, and it starts in our education system.
Yeah, a lot of it does. I do agree. There's definitely, you know, I tell some people, you know, there's people who just don't understand, you know, how is it possible that these people have even the presumption that they could even have the credentials to adjudicate, you know, sexual assault. And there really is this kind of culture that has been built up in our education system that is, you know, at bare minimum is apathetic to men and boys as a group, and at worst really is kind of hostile and malevolent to them. And unfortunately, we're now dealing with a lot of the fallout from that. That culture became entrenched in our education system in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, and it gained force in the 90s. And yeah, now we're dealing with, you know, the fallout.
We're definitely products of that system. Speaking of apathetic and hostile, the Rolling Stones, even their retraction.
Not the Rolling Stones, Rolling Stone.
Well, it's the Rolling Stones.
Not the band.
Touche. Even their apology letter, it wasn't an apology. It was apathetic, saying it was sort of like, my bad, we were doing what we were supposed to do.
The apology letter, and Jonathan, did you get a chance to read it?
Oh, I did. I have it pulled up right in front of me. And
it kind of reads, doesn't it, like, I'm sorry that in our desire to crusade on this issue, we may have trampled over a few people.
Yeah, and but even then it speaks to it. You can see the mentality that a lot of people, like these people who are reporting on it in the mainstream media in a lot of places, they have on it now, that they just they have this, believe the victim mentality. Unfortunately, that presumption is problematic because it presumes, of course, that the accuser is a victim, but of course, people who are wrongly accused are also victims. I mean, it was kind of, like, my bad, in our crusade, we just kind of, we goofed,
we may have stampeded over someone on the way through, but our intentions were good. Hey, you're listening to The Establishment on AM 700 KBYR. Alaska Talks here, talking to Jonathan Taylor, the founder of A Voice for Male Students.com, available on our Facebook page. It's currently 22 degrees and cloudy here in Anchorage. So, Jonathan, you and I had a chance to talk a little bit before this interview, and I think this speaks to something that came up when we were doing our prep. Culturally, do you think that the assumption from a lot of people who are so eager to assume guilty until proven innocent in the case of these accusations, do you think this is just the pendulum being pushed as far back the other way from where they perceive it used to be?
I think that is a very strong part of that. I think that, over the past 50, some would say 100 years, we've had a lot of activism in behalf of women as a group. Feminists, of course, have been pushing a lot of policies, a lot of cultural shifts. And, the conversation on gender, on gender equality has been very much dominated by feminists. Of course, feminism has been female-centric through and through, in its focus, and really men have at best been an afterthought in feminist philosophy. So, along with the cultural shifts that feminism has pushed upon the world, a lot of the world has adopted that female-centric worldview. I think, though, in addition to that, we also have there's also sort of a traditional something that's problematic in that traditionally, men have been viewed as the providers and protectors of women. Prior to feminism, we were lynching and executing a lot of people for rape. Rape has been historically looked upon, contrary to what a lot of feminists would say, rape has historically been looked upon very harshly. The biggest problem has been that, we just lacked the means to, investigate rapes adequately in the past, like DNA evidence and, a lot of
other...
And
there's no appeal, from the hangman's noose, unfortunately.
Exactly.
Yeah, once you inflict that sentence, it's there forever.
And but even if they don't get, even if they aren't killed, that the accusation tars them for life.
I just was going to get to that.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you've got great radio instincts, don't you? Hey, before we jump into that, can you stick around with us for the next segment?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we'll start this train of thought here, and then we may continue it over the next break. But like I said, if you're hanging someone that lasts forever, but in a way that person then is no longer interested in their reputation. But let's say, even if a charge is proven incorrect in a court of law, or even by the university process, I think you bring up a good point that the stigma attached to that will follow them around for the rest of their life.
And this Rolling Stones document, it didn't name names. They didn't. God forbid that information comes out. But the institutional damage that they caused is there for a long time.
Forever, probably.
Yeah. The Greek system at UVA is destroyed.
And what recourse do male students have in that situation, Jonathan?
Oh man, just the best thing that you can do is, maybe sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress. They might have a breach of contract case against the university. The way that universities are allowed to basically rewrite a lot of their student handbook policies at whim. But there's a lot of ways that you can kind of try and finagle with it through the legal system. So they can try for that. But the unfortunate truth is that in this day and age, the settlements that universities make with a lot of these in a lot of these cases, they aren't very high. So they aren't particularly punitive as they should be for these universities. But the good news is that they're becoming more and more punitive as they go along. Of course, we can always put them on blast in the media. I think at least we can and should do that.
And we can do that. Jonathan Taylor, we'll get to this and continue this thought on the other side of this break. We've got to go pay some bills. We're talking to Jonathan Taylor from avoicefrommalestudents.com. Find that link on our website. Stay tuned. We'll continue this interview on the other side of this break. Currently 22 degrees and cloudy here in Anchorage. Coming up, like I said, more with Jonathan Taylor. Next hour, we'll talk to Chris Story. This is The Establishment here on AM 700 KBYR. Sam?
Alaska Talks here.
Now, I have a question for you, Jonathan.
Sure.
And this is one of the little gems that tends to get thrown at people that ask questions like you're doing, and try to raise issues here. Are you a rape apologist?
Oh,
because
aren't we all?
Seems to be, yeah, we must be, because we're just trying to ask a question. And there's obviously, if you don't agree with me, you must believe the exact opposite.
Exactly. People, you know what, that argument, the argument that someone is a quote-unquote rape apologist. If they merely question, that is very traditionally used by feminists, by people on the very far left who tend to agree with them. That is just something that is kind of religiously, almost ritualistically invoked by these people whenever anyone dares to question that an accuser statement may have been less than 100% factual. But no, for the record, I think actually, not only am I not a rape apologist, I think that advocating for the wrongly accused will, in fact, in the long run, help accusers, because what happens is, a lot of the people who advocate for sexual assault victims today, they tend to be very short-sighted in their advocacy. They just have this mentality that if we just bulldoze due process, right now, and open up the floodgates so that anyone can make an accusation, then nothing will ever come wrong from that, and magically everything will work out okay. But my position, and the position of many who think like me, is that whenever we open the floodgates so that anyone can make an accusation, there's no kind of quality control for that, and so the inevitable fallout of that is that people will be making false accusations. And
not to connect the two, but that's why we have a grand jury process in
right.
Certain. Yeah, I mean.
Right.
Exactly.
So,
there is due process.
Well, and I think you make a good point, Jonathan, about subverting due process. And make no mistake, that's what's happening here. It's taking criminal justice and law enforcement out of the hands of the criminal justice system and attempting to put it in the hands of a university, where if you applied that to any other crime,
right.
people wouldn't go to the bank to have them decide the penalty for a bank robber.
Right.
Why should the university be doing that?
And even then, a bank robber would perhaps be more situated to deal with a bank robbery than a university would to deal with that, because universities, and this is one of the things. Let me jump on this here. The reason why they're able to get away with this is that historically, universities have been adjudicating and disciplining very simple, mild behavior, relative to criminal behavior, things like underage drinking or plagiarism. And for that reason, the courts have historically kind of turned a blind eye, or rather let them do what they want to under that premise. But very recently, our universities have taken that inch that the court system has given them, and they have obviously run a mile with it. So where this will really be decided is going to be in the court system. We're working these cases through the courts, and increasingly they're working themselves up into the higher courts as well. And eventually, we're going to need, I think, the Supreme Court to make a ruling on this, and to say, and what these rulings will eventually do is it will define the limits of administrative power in our universities, and it will say, no, this is what you can do, and this, no, you're clearly not qualified to do this. You cannot do this. So that's where we got to go.
Totally extrajudicial system that's just caused problems across the board, and I mean, maybe they need their own special courts. What do you think? No.
No. No.
Yeah. Well, this is a fascinating subject. We could go on and on about how this, not only in the education system, but how the education of young men, affects society as a whole and affects our culture, affects America
But before we let you go here, Jonathan, just give one more time. Give us the web address, and then tell us quickly some of the stuff that people will find there.
avoiceformalestudents.com deals with all sorts of issues. You'll find different ways that you can conduct advocacy locally, different ways that you can network with other groups. You'll find a heck of a lot of resources, statistics on graduation rates. You'll find a database of lawsuits for people who are challenging their schools whenever they've wronged male students. That'll help people, make legal challenges. You just got to explore it because things that you wouldn't find anywhere else, like a database of scholarships for men that you would think that wouldn't exist, but there are in fact a few out there in the world. But there's a lot more, but that could really just get the ball rolling. And feel free to go there, check it out, and explore more.
And Jonathan Taylor, we will our listeners will have a chance to hear you on the air with Michael Dukes on our morning show coming up next week, won't they?
Yeah, I believe on Tuesday. Is that right?
Yeah, it's on Tuesday. We've got you scheduled. Jonathan Taylor from avoiceformalestudents.com. Thank you so much for giving us part of your Saturday. You have a great weekend, sir.
Thanks for having me on.